under the program, again, solid waste providers must qualify to provide services through the city, and that process was handled through the city. And through that process, we've identified, I think, 7 or 8 companies that have been authorized to provide services in the city. It also allows those vendors to contract directly with residents for waste collection services and provide options for the residents to select a company from that approved vendor list for those sanitation services. Also under the ordinance, the city charges those vendors of infrastructure maintenance fees, which is to assist with any costs associated with maintaining the roads, because as we know, once we open the streets, we'll to trucks and other modes of transportation, then that's wear and tear on the roads, and so the infrastructure maintenance fee was intended to be able to assist in the freight costs associated with maintaining those roads. And again, under this model, it would allow residents who have sanitation services to be able to maintain their current sanitation service provider without having to make any changes, any unnecessary changes if they so choose. So under this model, again, we've gone through the process of reviewing and meeting with sanitation service companies throughout the city and qualifying providers to provide services throughout the city. So we've identified Fulton Sanitation and Recycling, and they serve districts 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7. But we have learned that because they serve those districts does not mean that they serve the entire district. And so we're working with those haulers to identify if there are any restrictions or limitations within their service delivery so that we can then be able to provide more accurate information to the public and be able to update the website and our communications accordingly. Under the sanitation ordinance, all providers that are qualified to provide services are required to provide regular waste collection, recycling services, bulk and disposal of bulk materials, white goods, and yard trimming. So any vendor that has been qualified to provide services in the city, they are required to make these services available to residents in the event that they request those. Also, vendors offer discounts for various populations. Those discounts are not consistent across the board, so residents will need to contact each individual vendor to learn about any discounts that they may offer. Community waste disposal, they serve District 1 and 2. Latham Home Sanitation serves Districts 3, 4, and 5. Waste Industries serves the entire city, so they serve all districts. Reliable Sanitation is in Districts 2, 3, and 4, and Waste Pro Georgia is in Districts 1, 2, and 3. And so those are those vendors that provide services from a residential standpoint. And then we also have 3 vendors that provide commercial or business-related sanitation services, and that is Republic, Advanced Disposal, and Waste Management. And again, they provide commercial services throughout all of the districts in the city. The infrastructure and maintenance fee in the ordinance, it assesses a 5% fee on the vendor's gross receipts for them conducting business in the city. Again, this maintenance fee is earmarked to assist with maintaining the roads, so the condition of the roads and streets throughout the city of South Fulton. So what does this mean for the resident? Again, in the free market enterprise, vendors are authorized to charge a competitive and fair rate. But while the city assesses this 5% fee to the vendors do have the authority to pass that fee on to the residents, just as with cable and fees and franchise fees that you may see on your cable and intercom and telecommunications bills. However, the city has met with the vendors and asked that they not do that, but again, that is up to their discretion, and so residents will need to have that conversation with the individual vendors in terms of how that infrastructure fee is handled by each provider. Some of the questions that we've received that have not been addressed throughout this presentation is Some residents have indicated that sanitation services are not available in their area. Again, while not all of the providers serve the entire city, we have found that waste industry serves every home throughout the city of South Fulton, and so they will be available to make those services available throughout the city. What is the deadline to select a service provider? The city did send out communication. Again, the ordinance was passed at the end of October, and so we were looking to begin enforcing this in November. However, we realized the constraints that have been placed on residents and the lack of communication that the city has not imparted. And so, based upon the city manager, he has requested that we extend the deadline to January the 1st to give us more opportunity to do some more outreach, some more communication information sessions, and to do a better job of gathering information from the sanitation providers to make that information available to the residents. In terms of exemptions from the sanitation requirement, as the ordinance is currently written, there are no exemptions. Every household is required to have a sanitation service via one of the qualified vendors that are on the list. So we have been in conversations with the city attorney, though, to reassess the ordinance to see how can we be more accommodating for some of those disadvantaged populations, such as our senior citizens, some of our individual disabilities. And so we do look forward to bringing forth to the council and this body a recommendation for how can we amend the ordinance, but as it currently stands, there is no exemption under the ordinance as it's currently written. Our vendors mandated to offer low trash and recycling services. The short answer is yes. Under the ordinance, all providers that are qualified to do business in the city are required to offer trash, waste collection, or general trash, household collection, recycling services, yard trimming, bulk waste, and again, but haulers are authorized. They may charge a fee for those additional services beyond just regular household collection. Is the city of South Fulton mandating vendors who charge residents the 5% fee? No, the 5% fee is assessed to the vendors on the receipts on their receivables from doing business in the city of South Fulton. However, vendors may pass their costs on to their customers. So going forward, highlight some of the communications. Some residents did receive the sanitation mailer that was sent out November the 12th. Again, that indicated that we will be enforcing the ordinance November 30th, and as I stated, city manager has directed us to extend that until January the 1st, again, to give residents time to learn about the different vendors and be able to make an informed choice where several vendors may provide services within their area. We've also included information on the website and in the last newsletter. And for future communications efforts, we're updating those sanitation distributions, and that information should be coming out later this week with more insight into what the sanitation services program looks like. We're also sending letters to businesses as this relates to services for their particular population. We'll continue to update the website. We're also including information in the utility bills with Greystone, and they should receive information with those bills that are distributed December 1st to December 31st. Greystone, we've reached out to them, but they would not allow third parties to include information in their mailers, so we have not been able to utilize that resource to reach that clientele. And then we are planning some information sessions, and that information will be forthcoming in terms of the dates and the locations for those. Also in this presentation, you have the website, as well as the phone number to our Public Works line, which is 470-552-4311. So the Public Works line is available to answer any questions related to the sanitation services. Next steps, I talked about the communications efforts. Again, residents are expected to contract for sanitation services by January 1st, 2019. And throughout this process, the city will just continue to monitor and assess and determine any areas for improvement as we continue to implement this program and to learn from our practices and continue to improve. And at this time, I will entertain any questions that you may have.
First question, the 470-552-4311. What hours is that number? What hours is someone answering that number, and who is answering?
Someone is answering the number 24/7. Public Works team is answering that number.
So there's a live person 24/7.
Yes.
Is that someone at Jacobs? Is that someone at City Hall?
That's someone at Jacobs.
This chart with the service areas, this isn't anything that is going out to the public, is it?
It will be with the next distribution, yes.
All right, so I feel that it's a little misleading. Some of these, as a layperson, I look at this and I think that, for example, I'm just picking one, community waste disposal services. It said the service area is District 1 and District 2. I would look at this and think that if I live anywhere in District 1 or anywhere in District 2, that this is an option for me. But that's not really how they work. I have called all of them and spoken to all of the people. So, for example, I can't remember the particular one, but one of them only operates in 2 neighborhoods, period. Like one neighborhood in District 1 and one neighborhood in District 3. So they don't service the whole area. And then there's Latham operates in a portion of District 5 for a few streets, but they don't do the entire district. So I'm just afraid that might be misleading.
So we did include a footnote that the vendor does not necessarily serve the entire area, but we'll make sure that we further clarify that on the distribution to the public. And also, we are working with the vendors to be able to hone in on their specific areas so that we can continue to update that information as we receive it.
How possible would it be to get a map, like our GIS map, where you can put in your address and it tells you who the council person is? Can we work with GIS and you can put in your address and it can tell you which vendors provide services?
So that's definitely one of the process things that we're putting in place. I think we would want to know that this is a continuous improvement process. So the first thing we did was the mailers that Ms. Winfield mentioned, but we also have coming up some additional mailers. We're also going to be doing a webinar as well as a town hall-like information session for our residents. I think the portion that you've asked for will be live on the website, but there will be a variety of different things that we'll be adding to the process.
Okay. I would really caution against this service area thing. I just think there might be more, it might cause more confusion. Speaking of the mailer, how many people did we mail that, I'm assuming, to every home in the city of South Fulton?
I don't know that one went to every home, but the next one we're sending to every home. But again, we were looking to utilize various outlets. We also hosted with one of the news media outlets as well. They posted a story, ran a story for us as well. And again, we utilized the Greystone insert. So we're trying to be economical in our efforts, but with the next it will go to all of the households.
So one of the suggestions that I have is that there are, in my district in particular, there are a lot of people who rent, but the owners live elsewhere. Is there can we get an email or a mailer that goes, or at least a letter that goes to them that says this has happened with this property that you own in the city, and as the owner you are responsible for getting the service?
So we're working with our community development. We do have a listing of all of the homes and residents throughout the area, so we will be sending it to those residences.
All right, so how many homes are currently not? Do we have a list or a percentage of how many homes currently have no service?
So we receive anecdotal data from some of the providers based upon homes that they may not be serving, and the number that has been presented to us is roughly around 12,000 households that may not have services to date. But again, that predates the ordinance, and so we'll be continuously working with those providers to receive information in terms of what residents started serving so that we can identify any gaps.
And well, I would love to get like a monthly report of not necessarily each individual home, but just what percentage do we have that are not covered, that are not covered, and for those people that are not covered, I'm assuming that by January 1, they will be we will give to them a provider of last resort. Like, you will have to get service with these people if you do not have this coverage by January 1. And I'm assuming that being the only vendor that provides residential service to the entire city is Waste Industries, that mandated person, that mandated company will be Waste Industries.
So we wouldn't commit to that. That would be inappropriate to say that. What I would say is you're correct that the goal would be by January 1st to ensure that all households have access to a provider and understand that they are required to have service. But right now, while Waste Industries is the only one that claims to deliver services to all households, if there are 12,000 that don't have it, then we say that's not necessarily true. I think also with the market being in place now, there will be other providers who will want to provide services outside of where they are. So this additional time, while the enforcement side of it is to help our residents, is also to help the market kind of right size itself and give those other folks opportunities to provide service. I think you're 100% correct that by the 1st, everyone will be required to have service, and we will be working with the vendors to ensure that they provide even outside of what has been presented to you today. We actually have a meeting on Friday that we'll be meeting with a couple of them, including Waste Industries, to help develop that further. And
to be clear, the enforcement is against the property owner and not the person living at the property.
That is correct.
So my last two, they're just two quick suggestions. One, I know that I've talked to some providers. I think that we just need to coordinate with our customer service representatives so that the people that are answering the phones when people are calling about service, that they have all the same information as well. And I would like to see us possibly, I'm not sure who's running Work Road, but if there's a way that people who want to just keep dropping their trash off at Merck Road, if they could register saying that they are doing that, so that like that is their preferred provider, and they're not obligated to pay a higher quarterly fee to someone else. If that's something they can do to save money.
Well, I think that may be something that we're looking at, how to leverage Merck Road, but what you don't want to do is interrupt the market and provide that opportunity, which does not provide full bulk service. It also doesn't provide the consistency that you need to help target and fight illegal dumping. When you look at the number of households that do not have service, in those same areas, we've seen elevated illegal dumping. And so you can't fight both by having an arbitrary option. We do want to provide people the option to use Merck Road for Merck Miles for the arbitrary dumping and things of that nature, but it's probably a deeper conversation than we're having tonight, but I don't think that would be the option. I respectfully push back a little bit on that.
Okay.
Councilwoman Willis?
I think
I'm sorry, you right.
so that Councilman Khalid kind of leads me into my question regarding the exemptions. I've been inundated with a lot of calls from seniors who have been in this community probably 40-some years, and they've never had to select a provider. So one of the options, they always take their things to Merck Road, and I know that we had talked to the city attorney about providing some type of language to where it's an exemption for seniors. Are we as a city looking at that to where they can still go to Merck Road and provide copies of their receipts, but they meet some type of exemption requirement? Because, you know, the seniors, they're on a fixed income, of course, and they're really upset about the fact that they have to select a vendor. So I don't know if that.
So, as I stated, we've begun conversations with legal to determine how do we address and make services accessible for similar populations such as the elderly. And those conversations will continue this week. And like I said, we'll come back to this body and make some proposed recommendations for how do we go about addressing that.
So will those proposed recommendations come back at our next council meeting in December? December the 11th? Okay. Also,
well, but you want to note that those changes would need to be put in the ordinance.
Yes.
Right? So the ordinance is the piece that governs that. So those changes would have to be ordinance change, legislative changes.
And I think the city attorney has been keeping log of those, so I don't know if you all are communicating on that. Also, to this form that you gave us regarding the services, is there any way possible that you can put on there what actual discount or senior programs are available? I do know when I called a couple of vendors, one of them, they're passing the 5% off to the residents, but they're only giving $1 discount for seniors, and it's not even really working. So if there's a way that we can at least put some information, if there's a senior program or a discount available for seniors and disabled on this, that whatever you send out to the people, that would probably be a little bit helpful. Are we still planning to use the liaison to kind of help with the communication with the providers? Is that still the plan? So my understanding was that we were going to have our public works director or whoever will be, after this process will be passed on, and he will have the communication with the sanitation providers. Are we still moving that way as far as customer service issues, complaints? So that's still the plan? Okay.
Yeah, we'll continue to stay tied with the waste providers. I mean, we're managing the calls that come in related to customer service, and we're continuing to engage with the waste providers to address those issues.
Okay, and my last question, those information sessions will be conducted in December, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Definitely prior to January 1.
Sorry.
Definitely prior to January 1.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Councilman. Okay, the next one is Councilmember Willis.
Mr. City Manager, we keep mentioning Murphy Road, but the last time I went through the sanitation ordinance as one of the original sponsors, I was told that it was going to be a cost to keep Murphy Road in operation. Is that cost going to be on us, or how, can you explain that? Because that was one of the main issues in determining whether or not we would even continue to keep Murphy Road. It was a 300K cost.
Well, we don't currently operate Merck now, the county does, and so we are still operating while we transition services. As you know, it takes a little while for us to close those things out, so that's one of the areas that we're still negotiating, working with the county on, is how we will coordinate that. So it's still operational. Merck now has not stopped operating, and so it wouldn't operate much different under our leadership than it would under Fulton County, except we would have more control and could incorporate some of these activities. So today would be a little bit too early for us to dive into that conversation because there's no agreement in place.
Okay, because I recall him saying that once we got into the business of sanitation, they weren't sure whether or not they were going to even keep Murphy Road open because of the cost associated to keep them in operation. So I just would caution anybody advocating for Murphy Road because we don't know the stability of it. The other thing is, do we need to legislate the extension of the January 1 deadline?
No, it is, legislation is silent on it, so we can arbitrarily extend that date, which we've done.
Okay, and the chart with the communication, is it possible that whoever is comprising this chart, can you all send it to the council members before you mail it out or send it out? Because sometimes things go out, we don't get an opportunity to weigh in, look at it, and a lot of things can be circumvented if you all get, look to the legislators who are actually talking to the people, dealing with the residents and getting the questions.
I'm sure we could send it out to the legislators, no problem, but I will tell you as an administrative activity, we also talk to residents quite often ourselves, and so with no issue in forwarding those activities, but it's also a matter of time as well. So if that's what the body would like, then we have no problem sending it to you before. I'd also say it's not going to look like what's in your packet or what has been distributed as a part of this. We'll be working with a graphic designer and some other folks to help put it together. So let's keep in mind there's some administrative activities that we've got to do the operational work as well as coordinate with the council.
Okay, administratively, you sent out the first mail. And when it came to people complaining, they didn't come to, the first people they came to were the legislators. We got all the emails, we got all the calls, we got all the complaints, we got blasting on social media. So if we're going to take all of that heat, please let us given an opportunity.
Duly noted, Councilman. We'll make sure to do that. I would just ask that we share the heat throughout the evening as we recognize that same activity.
That.
Yes, ma'am.
The other thing is enforcement. I got a lot of questions around enforcement. And so what I will say is once that January deadline has reached, we need to be clear on how we're going to enforce sanitation.
So I would love to kind of highlight that and spend a little bit of time on that, council member, because I think we've been quite clear that even at the beginning of the first proposed service model is that enforcement is a little bit difficult under any sanitation model because it is not a tax. And so as such, we have not seen or have a prime example of how you actually enforce the model. I think we've created or have provided a creative model through the ordinance, thanks to our city attorney, to where we provide the additional service for those who have not taken advantage of or complied. Then if we provide the service, they are then in line to be on the hook for that fee, and then you can enforce that way through billing. But when you align any of the models for sanitation, it is difficult to provide or to enforce it and strongly penalize. For any additional comments or questions, I would of course defer to our city attorney, but I wanted to make sure that we highlight that yet again, because enforcement is not a cut and dry activity around sanitation. And so we mentioned it before, but I want to keep drilling that home here, is that sanitation, enforcement of sanitation in the typical manner is not something that you can really do as a city.
Attorney?
I don't disagree with anything the city manager said. If there's anything specific.
Well, will enforcement be considered if you don't sign up by January 1st for sanitation, and then the city will have the authority to assign one to you and bill you for services? So that's what I'm saying. Is that a form of enforcement that we can make sure we communicate?
We can. It's going to take a lot of work as far as making sure that we are accurate with who is not signed up, putting that together. Administratively, I think we're talking about thousands of homes, thousands of people. It's going to take a lot of work by staff. I think that within 90 days, that may or may not be a reasonable period to expect that we would be at that point.
Okay, lastly, Mr. Mayor and City Manager, I just want to make this last point. There were several small haulers who came to our council meeting and came before that podium and blasted us for not supporting small haulers, and blasted us for not having our insurance at a reasonable price, who blasted us because they felt like we were trying to put them out of business. Now, I feel that we have done everything in our power to accommodate the small haulers, and I feel that the small haulers need to do everything to accommodate our residents. It cannot be a one-way street. And so they beg for our business, and they need to accommodate our residents.
Councilwoman Brown.
I'd like to highlight a couple of things. Since Waste Industries is the only provider that's providing citywide, I hope that's prominently displayed on whatever mailer. I think that one of the things I did learn is there's actually multiple pricing going on. And from what I understand, that might be an instance in which a provider might be servicing an entire subdivision. I need some language on that mailer to speak to that, so those communities may go back and try to leverage that to get greater discounts if that's possible. as well as one of the things we talked about in terms of implementation. I don't know if any consideration or any agreement is in place with the vendors that we can do data matching. We already know it's roughly 35,000 households. So if you're looking at the addresses relative to that, I hope IT is involved with that conversation in terms of implementation for compliance. And, you know, being that this is one of the core services, should we be looking at calling this an extension, or is it in fact a grace period to January 1st, 2019? And my last comment, I think we as a council, you know, we need to understand that as a new city, we're on a timeline. We stood the city up in 18 months, less than 2 years. I don't think we have to be wed to anything. So we're under contract with these providers for 1 year. I hope we're open to the best service delivery model for the residents, and I'll just leave it at that for now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, please.
Okay, the 470-522-4311 number, is that just for sanitation, or is that a public works number?
That's a public works number.
Okay, and that's the 24-hour jail's response. I think many of my questions were answered in reference to waste industries and them being the only people that service my area in general. I think Councilwoman Roel gave a great point as well as far as leveraging those relationships, and that's what I get for speaking last. But at the same time, I did want to make a recommendation to change that date from January 1st to at least February 1st. I think right now, a lot of people are getting this in the middle of the holiday season, November ending, and then we're going straight into Christmas. And I think it's a bit much to just have January 1st. You have to have all of this rectified for people who are still digesting what's going on. Yeah, so I don't know the process. I know we're in a work session, but I would like to make that recommendation, or if I need to, council, I'll make a motion for that.
So I think since the ordinance is silent on it, I mean, that's just a decision we could make. I think there are some considerations before committing to that we want to make. So we've got to kind of define what this enforcement means. And so encouraging people to contract with someone by January 1st doesn't mean that the money is out of their pocket by then, or that we want to give people time to partner with the appropriate vendor, them be responsive, and then how we enforce it follows that. So I think we could take that under consideration, and then we still have the December 11th meeting. We're going to be talking about this for a while, so if it's to the pleasure of the council, we can definitely come back and give an update on what the thoughts are.
But yeah, I would appreciate that. I know even the date initially being the end of this month, while you know that it's not going to be any direct impact, the residents don't. And these phones that we have go crazy because they feel that there is an urgency, and they think that they're going to be facing additional penalties, given that they've already just learned that they may have to pay certain things. And then the question is in reference to paying up front. Can you address that?
Yeah, so that's something that was actually brought to us, and while we don't control the market, I think a part of our conversation this week with some of the providers that was brought to our attention is what we do not want to do and will not allow is for a monopoly to be put in place and people take advantage of the residents and price gap. And so while there's not enough information in front of us today, we'll be having a fairly stern conversation this week with the providers. If that has been their normal practice, then that is how they operate. But if it has not been, and they're taking advantage of the market and environment, then I think that allows us to get involved a little bit.
And for those individuals who believe that they were going to include recycling and bulk in whatever selection we made, and now they're stuck with making a selection from these 8 vendors, or actually one, I'll say.
So with that situation, everyone has to offer it. It does not have to be in one bundle package, et cetera. So they are compliant with that. What I will say though is, as we look at how they offer it and where we are, I guess, assessing the fee for, we are monitoring, overseeing the market, ensuring that service delivery is quality and everyone is in compliance, and thus helping us also control the illegal dumping issues. That does not mean that each provider has to bundle their pricing to be able to provide the recycling, et cetera. They have to make it available. And so if they were charging $10 for regular pickup, for that $10, they don't have to include those other services. Does that make sense? They do have to make them available.
And can you speak real briefly to the 5%? I understand that we're regulating their services, but just for the people who may be watching, the 5%.
Yeah, I think so. I think we've got to have some internal conversations about that as well. So my understanding is and in reading the ordinance, is that it is on the gross receipts. And so if a company makes $1,000, then that's their gross receipts, and 5% of that should then be coming to the city. But what it appears has occurred is that they are charging, let's say their gross receipts are $1,000, and they are billing the 5% themselves. And so the way I read the ordinance, it means they're raising prices on themselves as well, that they're going to owe us 5% for the 1,000 and 5% for the added on, tacked on fee. And so I think that's a reason for us to have the conversation on Friday as well, because our interpretation of the ordinance needs to be in alignment.
So, just for clarity, on the 11th, we'll have an update in reference to the upfront charges that a lot of people are concerned about, and also an update on your recommendation, or my recommendation to extend this period to February 1.
Absolutely, yes, sir. I do want to caution on the upfront fees. While we're not in favor of it, if that's how the market is operated, we don't get involved in that. But yes, we'll provide clarity on December 11th, if not before.
Thank you. Oh, I would like to yield to Councilman. Okay.
So I just want to highlight on this current list, every district has at least one other option except District 6. We only have at least 7. No, y'all got. Well, according to this, y'all got one on a couple of streets or something. But we only have one option, and we only have one more meeting, which means that even if we came to the December 11th meeting with changes to the ordinance, we wouldn't be able to pass them until after that January 1 deadline. So people will be out of compliance before we would ever be able to change the ordinance. And that's provided that we would have a change ready by December 11th, because if we wait till January, whatever. So you see where I'm going with that. But I do worry about, I wonder if instead of changing the deadline, if we just offer a grace period for enforcement, and that way we aren't just continuously kicking back the deadline, because I think people will see that and think, oh, well, they're going to kick it back again. I don't have to make that change. I do want to thank you for whoever created this 24/7 Public Works number. That's going to be my friend, and I'm just going to, everybody who calls me, I'm going to tell them just call that. I'll listen to them and I'll take the call. Will we get reports from that number about our district? So if, like, I don't know, 50 people call the next month and they have complaints or things, Public Works issues in District 6, will I get some kind of report about that?
So we are working with them to develop a monthly reporting that goes out to the council related to public works services in general. And sanitation is just one component of public works, but we are working to be able to provide a monthly report, knowing that public works is new, and we want to be able to make sure we keep our hands on the pulse, so we are working on a monthly reporting related to public works.
Okay, and then lastly, I was just sort of reiterating, I know we do that a lot here, but if Merck Road is not an option, if I'm currently able to take my trash to Merck Road for $3, and I'm going to be mandated to get service, which in my district for waste industries, it's $100 plus because you have to get, they bill you up front. The first time if you're a new customer, you get charged for 5 months of service and not 3. And it includes a $40 fee, so they're also passing on the can delivery fee. You have to pay for your can. So the lowest you can get in is like $100. So if I'm going from $3 dropping in at Merkwood to $100, I think that we're going to have to think about we just need to see who are the people that are doing that. If they are renters that are doing it, and we can just get the owner to pay service, that's different than if we have people on fixed incomes doing it, and we're now mandating that they pay $100 for startup service and then $40.
So, Councilmember Khalid, I kind of want to back up a little bit because I think we are getting very involved with the market when we're looking at, when we probably should hone in on what our true focus is, and that's regulation and ensuring that sanitation is delivered citywide. And while people may not have been paying for sanitation for years and years, it does not mean that they should not have. And so if you had to pay for a can 10 years ago, then you would not have a new can fee, I don't believe. And so those activities in the areas where there are not, where there is not sanitation services or is being offered and not taken advantage of, is no coincidence that there are also activities of dumping and not using Merc miles and other activities. So we've got to kind of balance the different things that we're looking at. So we want to make sure everybody has residential services. If I have residential services, I no longer have to worry about where I dump my trash. I go to my front yard. And so that also means that if I'm not dumping it in the creek or the wherever, then the city has less of a cost as well. So our regulation is ensuring everyone complies, which should also have the impact that our residents also want, which is less litter and cleaner streets. So it's a give and take there. So we have to look at the overall good for the city and make that decision versus the one-off concerns of the immediate impact for costs that have been deferred for a very long time. It's the same thing with our millage rate that we talked about, that we deferred that forever and ever and ever, and then our values were so low that when they were raised, it was sticker shock. But those were deferred costs. I think this is a very similar activity, and we want to make sure to stay focused on that.
Yeah, so I'm going to push back. I think it's a little different. We've joked about this, but of course, I'm not a free market capitalist. I'm a socialist. And there's a difference between people who are dumping. So people who are driving their trash across town to work, they're good citizens. These aren't people who are being irresponsible.
That's true.
They just can't afford that fee. And even if we only, by some socialist mechanism, subsidize for some people for some amount of time, so they are not jumping from a few dollars to $100 or a few dollars to, this huge fee. I think that we just have to be, cognizant of that.
In agreement with you. I'm just saying that it's both. It's not either or.
Okay.
We got 3 more speakers in the queue. We're going to have Ms. Willis now speak. After Ms. Willis now speak, we'll go to the debate right now. Mr. Jackson.
Thank you. But anyway, thank you for the hard work that you've been doing. But what I would like to say, I did advocate for the small businesses, and I will always do that. Because I want to make sure everyone continues to work. But what I would like for you to do, you said you're meeting on Friday. Could you make sure that you ask everybody? Because when they met me at the park, I did tell every last one of them that they needed to comply with everything that everybody else did. Whatever waste industries and whatever the specs were in the RFP, everybody needed to comply. So nobody's asking for anything different. We're just asking for changes. Okay?
Thank you.
So noted.
Thank you. Ms. Gunn?
Assistant City Manager, I call you Vice President, so I can't do it. But,
Winfield.
Ms. Winfield, my apologies. Do you know if some of these vendors are actually charging, well, doing credit checks, and what happens if they're not able to meet the credit requirements, and then they only have one provider in the area? Do we have any provisions around that, or have we talked to the vendors about the credit checks? Because some of them are doing credit checks.
So we have not talked to them about that, but that is something we can add to the agenda for the meeting that we have this week.
Okay. And like I said, I'm just really concerned about the seniors, especially with one of the providers that we have, that they have to put almost $100-some up front, and that's just a real concern. So if we can bring back some really solid recommendations for seniors and disabled, I really appreciate it.
We will let it keep letting it meet.
I think so.
Okay, Councilwoman Willis.
Mr. Mayor and City Manager, well, mainly the City Manager for this discussion. For Mark Road, I know it keeps coming up, but one question you're going to have to ask yourself, does this comply with state law? With us lobbying for this, there were 3 services that we were mandated to provide services for. That's that is sanitation, police, and fire. We're supposed to provide the service. And so, in bringing and trying to bring the Mark Road, then you would have to enter into discussions with the county like we did the other sanitation services. And again, I don't know how stable Mark Road is going to be, because I don't even know if the county is going to keep it open. The other thing is, this about being surprised about paying for sanitation services, residents being surprised about that. We have always had that discussion through lobbying for cityhood. It was always a discussion that we had to provide this service. This service was going to be mandated. So this is not new. This is not new. What I will say, what is new, is that we did say that we were going to try to make the sanitation costs comparable to what they were paying now, or make it lower. But because we have adopted this model, that takes a lot of our negotiating powers away. And so, I would seriously, I know we had to do this to get us through transition, but I think that we need to reconsider this next year.
Okay.
I think Mayor, council members' concerns are noted. I would say that the 5% fee, and I've heard, it's an administrative fee, but that is keeping the cost at relatively the same cost. But you also have to know that the businesses in a capitalistic environment, which we're in, have the authority to pass those costs along. The Merck Roads piece, Merck Miles, I think we are looking at it, and I think you're right. That's why we didn't make a commitment, because we can't commit to making any of those changes, because our model does allow us to regulate, deliver, oversee, and stay in compliance. If we deviate from that, there might be some negative implications. So I would just ask again, December 11th, we'll have additional answers to those questions. But the model that we have, we're in compliance. I think we have to do a better job of putting communications out there. We've expressed that we'll be doing that. And I think over time, we'll be able to have a better model, and the council can look at going back to the procurement model or perfecting this one and sticking to it, and you'll have a baseline of being able to see what you like.
All right, I have some, I guess, not more comments, actual questions. First, let me thank you, Mr. Manager, for allowing the extended time for people to sign up. I think that was a great move on the part of the administration to do that. We mentioned something about those who don't have sanitation, some 12,000, I think we remember.
So that's the number that we got from providers. I never listened to the hen garden, the hen house. I think we want to decide what that number is.
Well, that's my point. It's not so much the number. Yeah. My point is that in business, that's an opportunity for the provider. So the provider can weigh in on this by simply calling people and saying, I'm all you got. and get you to sign up. So I just want to make that point. I don't want to exclude them. The other point I want to make is that we've heard a lot today. And I heard that I hope that we're taking it all in. And that we address it. Mr. Manager clean it up. So that we can, at next time we meet, we can come cut down on some of this conversational redundancy. And I think that's what we need. So if you would do all these things that are said today, if we can hear them and package them and get back with your recommendation, I think we'll be fine here. This is a classic example of not paying attention to staff recommendation. Classic example. We pay people good money to do a job. And they come stand at that podium and give recommendations for what we should do. And we need to at least hear and understand and move forward, because if we had done something at that time, if it didn't work, it was the staff's responsibility. Now it isn't. So I want to make that clear. The other thing too, when we get into things like this, I heard folks say that I talked to the providers. That's a problem. That is a problem, I'm going to say. That's a problem because you're getting too many conversations going on one issue. And when we have staff that is supposed to be having the conversation, I think if we have something to say, we tell staff, and staff, while you having your conversation with them, like we did tonight. Staff, you have your conversation, and Ms. Jackson said that, when you talk to them, here's what I want you to ask them. All right? I think that's a proper call. We have to be professional about this thing. And if we don't, we're going to continue to go round and round, we're going to be redundant, we're going to be talking out of turn, we're going to be all kinds of stuff. I just think we need to settle down and be redundant. Also, I'd like to speak on the issue of stakeholders weighing in. That's a big problem with us. Stakeholders need to weigh in. As Willis talked about, the document, I would like to see it before it goes out, stuff like that. I think some of that is worthwhile, really worthwhile. But I think that even farther than that, I would like to hear, when we do stuff like this, the sentiments of those who are in administration, who lead departments that's germane to this topic. I mean, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's time to really buckle down and get to a document that we all can live with and be able to vote on. So those are my comments. I just want to make them. And I appreciate all you've done. The staff has done a great job. All right? Thank you. All right? I'll entertain a motion. Ms. Crutch. That was it.
I move that we recess to executive session to discuss. Do you have any personnel matters to discuss real estate or litigation?
My recommendation would be to make it all three, just in case it comes up, so I don't have to stop you. I know typically I stop you guys.
That recommendation keeps us back there for 4 hours.
Well, typically I stop you, and then you guys get a little bit upset. So if you want the discretion, make it all three. If you have something.
I move that we recess in executive session to discuss real estate, personnel, and litigation.
Second.
Probably moved to second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Are we going on this machine? Okay. Now, are we using the machine? Let's try it.
Let's try it. I agree.
Yeah, put that there. All those in favor?
See your vote.
No, I'll tell you what happened tonight.
That's why we should do it now.
Yeah, I understand. That was just a joke.
Okay.
Who was mad I don't vote?
He has to send it to me. What, sure?
Yeah, he
What
was
else?
like that.
Don't you have to ask for it? Don't you? Okay.
Is that everybody? Do I have 4 votes up there?
I don't have to.
So,
Okay.
if you were to vote, it was supposed to be
You
adjourned.
voted already.
Somebody already voted.
Yeah, everybody. You
You didn't press yours?
I didn't.
Oh, Margaret said she did. Let
You
me
can
clear.
clear it, yeah, you can clear it.
I can clear it and they can vote.
All right, go ahead and vote now, Ms. Jackson. Okay.
I can't vote.
Now you
She just
can.
requested to speak if not vote.
Here's the open vote.
Good now?
No.
Somebody requested to speak.
There's a voting thing that's supposed to pop up on
I
our
think it's
screen.
because Margaret, she manually entered it. All right, so we need to have a meeting work session back there on this. All those in favor, raise your hand. All right, let's go.
Can we need to take our computers to do it, so you can show us how to get to the vote? Cause mine didn't pop up.
She entered it prior to y'all voting.
You had, it was actually, you had it right what you were doing, but since she manually did it, it didn't pop back up for you.